Hey guys, today's video is all about eco-friendly swaps you can make as a student. These are all small, easy lifestyle changes that, in the long run, will significantly reduce the negative impact your lifestyle will have on the earth. Today's video is going to be the first installment in a series of videos I'd like to make about various ways that we as students can reduce the impact that our lives have on the earth and the environment. This installment is going to be focusing specifically on schoolwork and studying, while future installments I'm thinking about are eating and getting around. Let me know if you have any other ideas, leave them in the comments. So let's get started. The four main areas I'm going to be covering are studying and reviewing, note-taking, supplies, and books. One option when you're doing review questions is to use a small whiteboard or a whiteboard notebook. Oftentimes when we do review problems, we use a sheet of paper, which ends up consuming water and trees and other resources to produce, when we actually didn't need to in the first place. A lot of times I find that after I do a practice problem, such as for math or physics, I do the question, learn from my mistakes, and then move on without ever looking back at those again. So instead of needing to preserve it forever on a sheet of paper that ends up being recycled or thrown away, you can just have it be temporary on a reusable marking surface. My next tip is to avoid printing things out and work digitally instead whenever it's possible. For example, if you need to revise an essay, just use the commenting tool on Google Docs. Or if you need to do a worksheet and your teacher has provided a digital file, just directly type it into that file instead of printing it out and writing by hand. Just like my previous tip, the goal of this is to reduce the amount of paper you're consuming. Another way to reduce paper waste is to print on both sides, of course. This is a pretty common tip that I'm sure most of us are already doing, but in case you aren't, always double check that your printer is set to double-sided. Additionally, I recommend you use digital flashcards instead of paper flashcards. First of all, it's just far more convenient. They're very portable. Instead of having to bring around a big stack of cards, you can just take your phone and they'll be available on the internet from any device in any place. And of course, you don't have to use so much paper for just something you're going to flip through maybe 10 times at most and then throw away again. Additionally, digital flashcards offer so many more extra features that I really see no reason to be using paper flashcards, even if you prefer the feel of a paper flashcard. For example, Quizlet, which is the flashcard website that I usually use, has so many different formatting options, and it makes it way quicker to create flashcards just by typing them. Now let's move on to my second category, which is taking notes. If you're permitted to use a laptop or tablet during your lectures, I recommend you take notes either by typing them or writing on a tablet. Of course, you may find that you retain information much better when you write them out by hand rather than typing, and something like a tablet and stylus may not be resources that are available to everyone, so don't feel like you're a bad environmentalist if you end up just using paper notes instead of digital. The goal isn't to be perfect, it's just to reduce your waste whenever you find it reasonable and it doesn't inhibit your lifestyle. If you do choose to stick to analog notes like I do, when you're picking out your notebooks, do your best to choose notebooks that are made of recycled paper. For example, I know that JetPens has an environmentally friendly collection that aggregates a bunch of different notebooks and pens that are made with recycled materials. Of course, buying recycled doesn't negate the energy and resources that still had to be used to produce the item. But the purpose of buying recycled is to send a message to companies that we, as consumers, want recycled materials to be used. By doing so, we can hopefully shift the direction of production. We don't directly control the companies as consumers, of course, but by voting with our dollars, we're telling them, hey, you should make more things using recycled materials because we like them and we are buying them. Because, the companies just want money, so if you put the money in the recycled, they'll follow it and they'll do their best to do more things using recycled materials. At least that's the goal. Now, what do you do with your notes when you're done with them after the semester has ended and you've determined that these notes don't really hold any future value for you? Well, two main options to avoid simply throwing them away or recycling them is, one, you can pass them down to a friend who is taking the class next year. For example, I determined that I probably wouldn't need my AP Calculus notes again in the near future because I don't plan to take a calculus class anytime in the near future, so I gave them to my friend who is currently taking that class this year so that they can use it. Maybe they'll pass it on to another person too, and it'll just become some sort of notebook heirloom. We'll see how that happens. But another option, if you don't have someone to pass it on to, is to simply sell your notes online. That way, since the materials have already been used, all the resources have been consumed and put into the world, at least get as much use out of it as possible before it's eventually put into the landfill or recycled. Part number 3 is going to be school supplies, including stationery and paper organization. When you're figuring out ways that you can organize your school supplies and papers, try to follow this hierarchy of zero waste options. Your first and best option is to repurpose or reuse something you already have, whether that be just folders from last year or doing some sort of DIY with soup cans to make pencil holders. Next, you could also borrow from other people. For example, I've never really owned a 1-inch binder. This is the only one I use for French, and I borrowed it from someone else. You can swap with someone else or thrift gift or borrow either in person or online. There are lots of different platforms you can use to buy or sell secondhand because the goal is to use what is already out in the world instead of creating more demand for new products. Lastly, if none of these are viable options for you, you can, of course, buy something new. Here are my tips for some more eco-conscious choices that you can make when you're buying new things. Number 1 is to invest in things that are durable for anything that you plan to use for more than a year or even more than a month, such as backpacks and binders and folders and pencil cases, notebooks, pen bodies, just all these kinds of things that are not consumable. Do research on the internet about the quality of the item and the ethics and materials and labor practices and all that fun stuff of the brand. When you're choosing pens or pencils or even whiteboard markers, choose items that can be refilled rather than having to throw away the whole entire pen body after you use up all the ink. And after you have used up all the ink in a particular pen, I recommend buying refills instead of an entire new pen. Besides requiring less energy and fewer resources to produce a smaller refill instead of an entire pen that also includes a refill, usually refills will come in bigger bulk packages that use less packaging than buying individual new pens. One pen type that is the pinnacle of refilling and less wasteful packaging is the fountain pen, since these are durable metal bodies that can consistently be reused. In fact, the entire purpose of a fountain pen is to be refilled with lots of different ink types. And you can buy fountain pen ink in a glass bottle instead of using a separate refill cartridge like the plastic cartridges that are typically used in ballpoint or gel pens. And of course, just like notebooks, you can buy supplies that are made with recycled or at least more environmentally friendly materials. For example, JetPens once again has their eco-friendly collection that includes pens that are made with a good amount of recycled plastic. And some backpack companies like Kanken or Patagonia reuse recycled fibers. Our last category is books, and once again refer to that hierarchy of needs. The library is a great resource to save money and to be a little bit more environmentally friendly than buying yourself a book. If you do need to keep something for longer than the library's checkout period, or you can't find it at your library, you can consider buying the books secondhand. And when you do have these books, avoid writing in them. Instead, do your practice work on either a separate sheet of paper or in a whiteboard notebook like the ones I previously mentioned. This way you can resell it or pass it on to someone else without any of your markings in that book. Some options for passing on a prep book include giving them to your friends or siblings, selling them online, or you can exchange them. One resource for exchanging prep books is Breaking Book Barriers, which is an online platform that allows you to send in your books and then exchange those for more prep books. The same applies to textbooks as well. You can buy and sell them secondhand, or you can rent them as well. There's a large variety of services out there for renting your textbooks. And if you have to buy it new, for example, if you need some sort of activation key for an online resource, you can buy the ebook instead of the physical book, since that doesn't require the resources of printing it. And ebooks are quite convenient because instead of having to carry around a fairly heavy textbook, you get to just store them on your laptop or tablet or phone. I hope you found these tips helpful, and if you have additional swap ideas, be sure to leave them in the comments as well as any suggestions for more topics I should cover in future videos about eco-friendly swaps for students. I upload new videos every Monday, and my Instagram, where I post photos of my bullet journal and notes, is @studyquill. See you next time!